The scream split the night, raw and jagged, dragging me out of a restless sleep. I stumbled across the cold wooden floor, my chest hammering. I told myself it must have been a dream, but dread clawed deeper with each step. The house, still unfamiliar, seemed to breathe with me, its shadows stretching too far. I whispered, "It's nothing," though my voice trembled in the silence. Moonlight spilled across the wall and froze my breath. A handprint. Dead Handprint. Large, wet and smeared, pressed deep into the cracked plaster. My stomach lurched, bile burning my throat. I reached out, praying it was paint or dirt. My fingers hovered, trembling. The mark was fresh, glistening like blood under silver light. "No one else is here," I whispered again, but it sounded hollow. The handprint was higher than I could reach. A chill air swept the hallway, smelling faintly of iron. I stepped back, my skin prickling, and in the reflection of the glass frame nearby, I swore I saw another hand move. My pulse thundered as the silence returned, heavy and suffocating. I wasn't alone. Something wanted me to know it had touched the walls first. The next morning, I tried to convince myself it was a trick of the night. The sun lit the house differently, softening the edges of dread, yet the walls still seemed to whisper. I brewed coffee, the bitter steam grounding me, but my eyes kept drifting to that hallway. The handprint was gone. I ran my fingers over the plaster, smooth and cold, but the faint metallic smell lingered. My stomach twisted. "I imagined it," I muttered, though doubt hollowed the words. My phone buzzed with a message from Anna, asking how the move was going. I typed back, "Fine," but deleted it. The truth felt heavy, unspeakable. As I turned away, I caught the faintest shimmer in the corner of my eye, like fingers brushing the air. My skin tightened. Silence pressed down again. No birds outside, no car sounds, only the faint ticking of the old clock. I whispered, "Please, just let it be gone," but deep down I knew the house wasn't finished with me. Night returned like a punishment. I lay awake, listening to the silence press against my ears. The floorboards moaned even though no one moved. At 3:07 a.m. the sound came again, a scrape along the wall, deliberate and slow. I held my breath. The darkness seemed alive, every corner watching. "Not again," I whispered, clutching the blanket tighter. Then it came, the faint press of skin against plaster, a dragging, sliding noise. I forced myself up, legs weak, throat dry. The hallway stretched too long, shadows growing with each step. My phone's flashlight shook in my hand. I lifted it, and there it was. The handprint, darker than before, streaked downward as if something had slid. My pulse hammered. The air reeked of iron and decay. "This isn't real," I whispered, but as the words left me, I swore I saw a second print appear beside it, pressed with slow, deliberate force. Sleep abandoned me completely. I dragged myself into the living room, eyes burning from fear more than exhaustion. The air felt thicker, heavy with something unseen. The walls seemed closer, leaning toward me. I rubbed my eyes, whispering, "Just tired, just tired." But when I looked again, a faint shadow lingered on the far wall, shaped like a hunched figure watching me. My breath quickened. I grabbed the lamp, flicked it on. Light filled the room, but the shadow remained. The figure didn't move, yet the handprint pulsed faintly on the wall behind it. I stumbled backward, heart hammering, unable to blink. Then, in a blink, it was gone. Only the wall remained, cracked and empty. My chest heaved as I muttered, "What do you want?" But the silence gave no answer, only the faint echo of a laugh that wasn't mine. By the fifth night, I couldn't pretend anymore. The handprint had become ritual. Every night at nearly the same hour, it appeared, darker, larger, hungrier. I stopped trying to clean it. The more I touched it, the worse it grew. I barely ate, barely slept, just waited for it. The silence of the house became unbearable, every creak a warning. I whispered prayers into the dark, but no comfort came. I started talking to the empty air, pleading for answers, for mercy. My phone stayed silent, though I wanted to call Anna, to hear her voice, to feel less alone. But I couldn't. How could I tell her the walls were alive? That something unseen touched me each night. Tonight, as I sat on the floor staring at the mark, I realized the truth. It wasn't a haunting. It was a claim. The house wasn't just occupied. It belonged to something else, and it wanted me to know I was trespassing. I began writing everything down, desperate to prove I wasn't unraveling. Each night, I logged the time, the sounds, and the way the mark grew darker. My handwriting shook on the page, ink blotting where my fear bled through. I told myself documentation was control, but deep down, I knew I was only recording my descent. The silence around me felt deliberate, as if the house hushed to listen. I whispered, "I see you," into the empty hall, hoping acknowledgement might disarm it. Instead, the walls creaked in reply, sharp and mocking. The air carried a low hum, a vibration I felt in my bones. My breath fogged in the coldness that spread even though it was midsummer. I clutched the notebook tighter, as if words could shield me. When I looked up again, the pages rustled though no wind stirred, and I swore the ink itself shimmered, moving like veins across the paper. My proof was turning into something else. Something alive. I called Mark the next morning. He was the only one I trusted enough to bring into this madness. When he arrived, his familiar grin softened the edges of dread. "Man, you look wrecked," he said, setting down a bag of groceries. I forced a laugh, hollow and weak. "I need you to see something," I muttered. He followed me to the hallway, his sneakers squeaking on the wood. The wall looked clean, mocking me. I pressed my palm against it, whispering, "It's here at night." Mark smirked, shaking his head. "Stress, that's all. You're letting this place get to you." His dismissal hurt more than I expected. I clenched my fists. "Stay tonight, you'll see." He hesitated, then sighed. "Fine. But when nothing happens, you're buying me beer." My stomach knotted. I wasn't sure if I wanted him to be wrong or right. That night, Mark sprawled on the couch with a smirk while I sat rigid in the chair, clutching my notebook. Midnight dragged heavy across the room. The clock ticked too loudly, filling every silence. Mark yawned. "See? Nothing." I didn't answer, eyes fixed on the hallway. Then it came, a faint dragging sound, slow, deliberate, nails raking plaster. Mark froze, his smirk fading. His eyes widened as the hallway darkened unnaturally, shadows thicker than before. The sound grew louder, closer. Then the handprint appeared, seeping out of the wall, wet and black-red. Mark muttered, "Holy," before cutting himself off, backing into the couch. My throat tightened, relief and terror blending. "Do you believe me now?" I whispered. He didn't answer, only stared at the wall, his breath shallow. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. Mark paced the living room muttering, "That's not possible." His bravado had drained, replaced with restless fear. I sat trembling, notebook open, scribbling what I'd seen. The house seemed heavier with him here, like it disliked an intruder. "We should leave," he said, voice cracking. I shook my head. "If we run, it follows. I know it." His eyes darted to the walls, his skin pale. A sudden thump echoed upstairs, deep and violent, rattling the picture frames. Mark jumped, fists clenched. "What the hell was that?" he whispered. I swallowed, my voice shaking. "It doesn't want us together." The silence stretched, then the sound of faint footsteps began to descend the stairs, too slow, too heavy to belong to either of us. We stood frozen, listening, our bodies tense, waiting for something we didn't want to see. The footsteps stopped, but the silence that followed was worse. Mark whispered, "We need to get out." I grabbed his arm, shaking my head. "If we leave now, it will follow us. I need to know why it's here." He pulled away, panic tightening his jaw. "You're insane, Daniel." His words cut sharp, but fear had him by the throat too. We both stared as the handprint reappeared on the wall, larger, stretched higher than before. This time, it dripped steadily, thick and red, pooling at the baseboard. Mark gagged, stumbling back. My chest tightened, a sick certainty spreading through me. The house wasn't just haunted, it was feeding. I whispered, "It's growing." And the words felt like a death sentence. Mark's face paled, and in his silence, I knew he finally believed. The next day, Mark refused to come back, leaving me alone with my thoughts. By dusk, my chest felt like a cage too tight for my breath. That's when I met him. He was standing at the edge of the property, tall, gaunt, eyes shadowed by the brim of an old hat. His presence made the air heavier. I asked, "Do you live around here?" His gaze lingered on the house, not me. "No one lives here," he replied, his voice low and certain. My skin prickled. "I do," I whispered. He turned then, his eyes dark with something unsaid. "Then you've already let it in." The way he spoke, it was like he knew more than he wanted to admit. A warning wrapped in silence. Elias didn't leave when I stepped closer. His presence felt anchored, as though the earth itself held him there. "You've seen the mark," he said, eyes never blinking. My heart stuttered. "You know about it?" He nodded, lips pressed thin. "It's older than you think. It doesn't haunt the house. The house belongs to it." His words sank like stones into my chest. "What is it?" I asked, desperate. He looked at me then, finally, with a grief so deep it seemed bottomless. A hand that never let go. Before I could question him further, he turned, walking away into the fading dusk, leaving me with more fear than answers. 950 characters. That night, I couldn't sleep. Elias's words rattled in my skull. At 2 a.m., the sound came again, a faint dragging against the plaster. My phone light quivered as I followed it. The handprint was there, larger than ever, dripping thickly. But this time, a second outline hovered faintly beside it, as if another hand reached through but hadn't pressed fully. My chest clenched. I whispered, "Why me?" The air grew colder, and then I saw it, an outline in the shadows, the shape of a face twisted with grief. A ghost, translucent, lingering just long enough for me to recognize its sadness before it dissolved back into the wall. 950 characters. I sat on the floor, shaken, notebook open beside me, hands trembling as I scribbled every detail. My words felt powerless against what I had seen. The ghost's eyes weren't angry but mournful. As I wrote, the lamp flickered, plunging the room into a stuttering rhythm of light and dark. Each flicker brought the faint image of that face again, closer each time, as though it was trying to be seen. My throat tightened, fear warring with pity. "What do you want?" I whispered into the empty air. For a moment, I thought I heard a reply, faint and broken, like breath through cracks. One word carried through, trap. The presence lingered even after the light steadied. I couldn't shake the feeling it wanted me to uncover something. When I touched the notebook again, a smear of ink spread across the page, forming a crude shape of a hand. I recoiled, breath sharp. The word Elias had said echoed in my head, a hand that never let go. My pulse thundered as I looked at the wall once more. The ghostly face had gone, but the handprint pulsed faintly, as though it breathed. My gut twisted. This wasn't only torment, it was a story carved into the house, bleeding through time. I whispered, "I'll find out what happened," though I wasn't sure if it was a promise or a curse. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I found Elias near the abandoned church on the edge of town, the air colder there than anywhere else. "You know what it is," I said, desperation cracking my voice. He stared at me for a long time before answering. "It isn't a ghost, not in the way you think. It's bound." His words felt sharp, like broken glass. "Bound to what?" I demanded. Elias finally looked me in the eyes, and I saw sorrow etched deeper than wrinkles. "The family that owned your house spilled blood in its walls. It clings to that blood, feeding, growing." My heart sank. "So it's them?" He shook his head. It's everything they left behind. Rage, grief, cruelty. It became its own thing. The silence around us seemed to lean closer, listening. I whispered, "How do I stop it?" Elias exhaled slow, like it pained him to answer. "You don't. You survive it, or you join it." When I returned home, the air felt heavier, as if the house knew what I'd learned. The handprint was waiting, fresh and glistening as though it had been placed moments before. I pressed my back to the wall across from it, unable to look away. My voice cracked as I said, "I know what you are." The silence pressed deeper, thick with unseen weight. The walls creaked, groaned like they were alive. The handprint pulsed once, faint but undeniable, like a slow heartbeat. Fear clawed through me, but something inside me shifted. I wasn't just its prey anymore. I was its witness. Mark came back despite swearing he wouldn't. His face was pale, lips tight with denial, but fear glimmered in his eyes. "I couldn't stop thinking about it," he admitted. I showed him the notebook, pages filled with frantic writing and sketches of the prince. "It's not just haunting me," I said. "It's a curse." He flipped through, scoffing though his hands trembled. "Curses aren't real." A thud upstairs cut through his words. He froze, the sound followed by another, heavier. We both looked toward the staircase. "Tell me that's the pipes," he whispered. My throat was dry. "Pipes don't bleed," I muttered. The footsteps on the stairs grew louder, each step deliberate, echoing through the house. Mark's face drained of color. I wanted to run, but my legs rooted in place. Shadows thickened around the staircase, coiling like smoke. Then we saw it, a figure, half-formed, emerging slowly. Its body was fractured light and shadow, but its hands were clear, red-stained, dripping endlessly. The sight froze my breath. Mark whispered, "What is it?" My voice trembled. "The past." The figure reached for the wall, pressing its hand into the plaster. Another mark spread wide, oozing. It wasn't fading anymore. It was multiplying. The walls were becoming canvases of blood and memory, and we were trapped inside its gallery. The house vibrated with energy, walls creaking and groaning as more prints spread like veins across the plaster. Mark grabbed my arm, shouting, "We have to get out." I pulled away, shaking my head. "If we run, it follows." My words felt certain, as if whispered into me. The air turned icy, our breath fogging, while the walls dripped red. Then came the laugh, a hollow, broken sound that didn't belong to anyone alive. Mark stumbled back, covering his ears. I whispered, "It wants us to remember." His eyes widened. "Remember what?" I didn't answer, because deep down I already knew. Whatever had happened in this house wasn't finished, and now it was using us to finish it. Sleep abandoned me completely. Every corner of the house carried the pulse of something alive. The handprints multiplied, covering walls like a spreading infection. Mark sat near the window, clutching his head, muttering that we had to leave. But I couldn't. The house wasn't just showing me fear, it was showing me memory. I stood in the hallway, tracing one of the dripping marks. It was warmer than the wall, as if still fresh. A vision flickered, sharp and fast, shadows dragging a body through the same hallway, muffled screams echoing in my ears. I staggered back, gasping. Mark rushed forward, shaking me. "Daniel, what's happening to you?" His eyes searched mine, but I couldn't answer. The house had chosen me. Mark begged me to leave. His voice shook, but mine was calmer than I expected. "It wants me to see," I told him, and even I hated how certain I sounded. He cursed under his breath, pacing like a trapped animal. Then the air grew sharp, a metallic sting filling our lungs. The prints began to shimmer, pulsing brighter until the hallway glowed crimson. Shapes moved inside the marks, outlines of faces, twisted in agony. Mark shouted, "Stop looking at it." But I couldn't look away. The visions pulled me closer, like the wall itself wanted me inside. For the first time I felt pity stronger than fear. Whatever was trapped here was suffering, and it was using me to scream. That night, the house turned violent. Doors slammed shut, windows rattled like gunfire. Mark screamed as the lights burst, plunging us into flickering darkness. I grabbed him, pulling him toward the center of the living room, but the floor itself groaned beneath us. The prints spread faster, dripping into pools that stained the boards black-red. A shape rose from the shadows, half human, half smoke, its arms stretching wider than the walls. Its hands dripped endlessly. I shouted, "What do you want?" The entity's face twisted, unformed, yet its mouth opened with a sound that was both scream and sob. My ears rang. Mark covered his face, sobbing. My chest ached with a truth I didn't want to face. This wasn't just haunting us, it was consuming us. Mark shouted at me to run, but the floor split with cracks that sealed behind us as if the house itself were closing its jaws. The smell of iron thickened, choking us. I dropped to my knees, pressing my palms over my ears as whispers flooded in. The voices weren't one, they were many, layered and broken, crying, pleading, begging. Each word pushed into my mind like nails. Trapped, forgotten, bound. Mark clutched my shoulder, shaking me violently. "Fight it," he screamed. But I couldn't tell if he meant fight the entity or myself. When I looked up, the walls were bleeding openly, streams of red running like rivers. My notebook on the floor soaked in the dripping liquid, the ink warping into unreadable shapes. The house wasn't just showing history anymore, it was rewriting it with us inside. The entity loomed closer, its hands stretching until they nearly touched the ceiling. Mark screamed, swinging a lamp at the wall, but the object passed through, useless. The dripping intensified, pooling at our feet. My body shook, but I forced myself upright, glaring at the mass of shadows. "You're not faceless," I whispered. The moment I said it, I saw them, countless figures layered in its form, their faces twisted in grief and rage, trapped within its body. They weren't the enemy. They were prisoners. Mark sobbed, collapsing against the wall. My chest tightened as I whispered, "I'll find the truth." The figure pulsed with violent energy, shaking the house, and I knew it had heard me. It wasn't done. Not yet. By morning, the air in the house was thick with silence, the kind that felt heavier than sound. Mark refused to move from the couch, pale and shaking. I wandered the hallway, staring at the prints, now dried into black stains that seemed burned into the plaster. Elias's words haunted me. Bound, blood, family. I pulled my phone and searched for records of the house, but the internet connection dropped every time I neared the hallway. Frustration boiled in me, and I shouted, "What do you want me to see?" For the first time the answer came, not in sound, but in a sudden cold rush and a vision flashing before my eyes. I saw a family huddled in the same room, their faces pale, their bodies pressed against the walls. And then the hands, dozens of them, dragging those people into the plaster as if the walls themselves devoured them. My legs gave out, and I dropped to the floor, breathless. I couldn't ignore the truth anymore. This wasn't random. It was deliberate. The walls weren't haunted, they were prison bars. That night, I confronted Elias again. He stood under a broken street lamp, shadows hiding most of his face. "You lied to me," I said. His jaw tightened. "I told you enough." My fists trembled. Enough to keep me alive, not enough to escape. His silence was damning. "Finally," he muttered, "because escape isn't possible. You think I don't know? I lived in that house once." The words hit like a blow. "You... what?" Elias's eyes glimmered with grief. "It took my family." I barely made it out. My chest tightened, a cold fury igniting. "Then, why send me back there?" He lowered his gaze. "Because maybe you'll do what I couldn't." The revelation tore at me. Elias had left, but the house still bound him through me. When I returned, Mark was standing at the wall, his hand hovering inches from the largest print. "Don't touch it," I shouted, but he didn't move. His eyes were glassy, his face blank, as if the wall itself was whispering to him. I rushed forward, pulling him back. He gasped, like waking from a nightmare, eyes wide. "I heard them," he whispered. My heart pounded. "What did they say?" His voice broke. "They begged me to let them out." The word sent a shiver through me. If the house was a prison, then every mark was a chain, every face inside a prisoner crying to be freed. But freeing them might mean destroying us. That night, the visions didn't wait for sleep. They poured into my mind as I sat trembling in the living room. I saw the family again, the original owners. The father's face twisted in rage, the mother's eyes wide with terror, children crying. Blood soaked the floorboards as their hands clawed for escape. The walls swallowed them whole, sealing their screams inside the plaster. The handprints weren't warnings, they were remains, impressions of the damned. I gripped the arms of the chair until my nails dug grooves into the wood. Mark sat across from me, his face pale. "You saw it too, didn't you?" I whispered. He nodded, eyes hollow. "It doesn't want to kill us, Daniel. It wants us to join them." The words sat heavy between us, undeniable. The house shook violently, just past midnight. The walls split and dozens of hands clawed through, reaching into the room. Mark screamed, swinging wildly, but his blows passed through like smoke. I pressed against the floor, eyes wide as the hands grabbed at my legs, cold as ice. I shouted, "What do you want from me?" And then it came, the truth whispered not in words, but in images burning my mind. I saw Elias as a young man, trapped in this house, watching his own family dragged away. His survival had cursed him. The entity wasn't just bound, it was bound to survivors, chaining itself to whoever lived. My chest heaved as the realization struck. Elias hadn't escaped. He had only passed the burden on to me. And now it was my turn. The silence after the confrontation pressed down like a weight. The walls, once alive with shifting handprints, were now bare and cold. The protagonist breathed heavily, each gasp a desperate attempt to feel alive. The floor was damp, holding the residue of the entity's passing. Shadows lingered in the corners, twisting into familiar shapes only to vanish when looked at directly. The sidekick sat hunched, trembling, unable to speak. The ghostly presence hovered, faint and translucent, torn between sorrow and fading anger. The stranger stood silently, his eyes hidden, his secrets still heavy. The skeptic clutched their chest, whispering, "I was wrong, I was so wrong." The protagonist whispered, "It's over, isn't it?" But the silence was cruel. The handprint reappeared faintly, a reminder that some horrors do not vanish. The final echo of laughter, hollow and cruel, lingered in the room. Peace was not given, only a fragile pause before the next terror. The morning light seeped weakly through cracks in boarded windows. Dust motes danced like spirits in the beam. The protagonist stared at the ghost's fading outline. Her eyes brimmed with tears, not knowing whether to thank it or curse it. The sidekick whispered, "We're alive, but at what cost?" His words echoed the broken silence. The stranger looked away, unwilling to meet her gaze, his shoulders heavy with guilt. The skeptic muttered prayers under their breath, the world they knew shattered beyond repair. The ghost extended a trembling hand, fading slowly into mist, her expression torn between sorrow and relief. The protagonist whispered, "Do you want release or revenge?" But the ghost only wept. The air grew colder, pressing against their skin like a warning. The handprint flared once more on the wall, dark and fresh, mocking their hope of escape. The silence returned, heavier than ever. The ghost's fading figure lingered in the protagonist's mind, even after the mist dissolved. The silence grew unbearable, broken only by the house groans. The sidekick finally spoke. "This house isn't empty. It never will be." His voice cracked, fear soaking each word. The skeptic leaned against the wall, eyes vacant, muttering nonsense like a broken record. The stranger finally admitted, this was never about freeing her. It was about binding us all. His words chilled them, revealing his part in the curse. The protagonist gripped the wall, her hand shaking as she touched the wet print. The mark pulsed, as though alive, veins spreading faintly from its edges. The air thickened, pressing on their lungs, forcing shallow breaths. She whispered, "It's not over. It's never over." The laughter returned, distant yet sharp, carried through the cracks in the wood. The nightmare was not finished. The house shook with an unseen force. The ceiling groaned, flakes of paint snowing down. The handprints multiplied, spreading across every surface, crawling like living veins. The sidekick screamed, covering his ears as whispers filled the room. The skeptic collapsed, clawing at their own skin, begging for it to stop. The stranger stood unmoving, as though expecting this final storm. The protagonist cried out, "Why won't it end?" But the only answer was the sound of fingernails dragging along wood. The ghost flickered, her torn face split between grief and rage, bound by chains of smoke. The laughter was closer now, pounding in their skulls. The air turned thick with rot, forcing coughs and gagging. The protagonist screamed back into the shadows, demanding, "Show yourself!" And for a moment, silence returned. The room pulsed once more with living darkness. The final truth was about to emerge. The silence cut deeper than the screams. The protagonist turned slowly, her breath fogging in the cold air. The walls were alive with handprints, crawling and shifting like waves. The sidekick whispered, "We can't escape. Not anymore." His words fell flat, swallowed by darkness. The skeptic lay unmoving, a husk emptied by terror. The stranger stepped forward, voice low, "The house has chosen." His face was solemn, but his eyes gleamed with something darker. The ghost reached once more, a final flicker of hope or damnation, but then dissolved into ash. The protagonist collapsed to her knees, hands over her ears, whispering, "Please, let it end." A final voice echoed in her mind, cold and eternal, "It never ends." The handprint flared bright red, casting the room in a bloody glow. The story closed not with freedom, but with the promise of more terror to come.